Maybe if I... No, I can't do that. What's wrong? I really want to make another Dragon Ball related video, but I don't know on what. Eebworld. What? Why'd you call me like that? You should know the answer. You should make a video about that. That, you say? Yup. You should make a video on the next Dragon Ball game music tier list. Wait, what was your idea? I think we should leave that one for another time. Yours makes a lot more sense. Are you sure? Yeah, I mean, you've already talked about all the handhelds now, so this video's long overdue. Well, that's true. Wait, hold on. Huh? Ah, that's better. What the? How did I get here? I learned a new trick. Well, could you have at least let me be at my usual spot? Sorry, I could only switch our positions. Go sit down by yourself. This is gonna be the second time I do a tier list for Dragon Ball game music. Last time, I went over all the console games, but since I now went over all the handheld games, it's time for me to add those in this tier list. Now this is going to be hard honestly, because I'll be real with you, I don't have that much of an attachment to the handheld games. And the fact that these OSTs aren't really talked about doesn't help much. But I'll do my best to put them in a justifiable spot. I did change the tier list a bit ago, so if you thought it looked different from last time, that's why. Also, since there are a lot of games I have to go through, I'll try to keep it very short. Starting with the Game Boy and Game Boy Color era, put all of them in D tier. It's nothing really to do with the songs themselves. They actually do a good job in doing what they have to do. No, I just can't imagine myself, or anyone else in that matter, listening to these songs and bop to them. Game Boy music is a lot more chiptune sounding than NES music, so they never feel amazing to listen to. So for anyone who likes any of these soundtracks, I'm sorry, but I just can't. Now going to the GBA era, Legacy of Goku starts it off. This game may not be as well beloved as the sequels, but the OST bops. I'm not a huge fan of GBA music either, but somehow I feel like I can listen to this OST a lot more than other GBA games. And for that reason, I think I'll give it an A tier. Bangers here and there, and they all fit the game really well. Next is Dragon Ball Z Collectible card game, and I kid you not, I can't find this game's OST anywhere. The answer to why that is actually simple though. It's because this game just reuses the Bruce Falconer score of Dragon Ball Z for its music. So for that, I can't really put it in a tier. It goes in the reused tier. I didn't even think this was gonna be useful today. Me neither. Legacy of Goku II was next, and this OST for whatever reason feels a lot more dramatic than the last games. Don't get me wrong, it's still pretty good and somehow doesn't even sound like a GBA game's music. But personally, I don't know if I can really say it's better than the first games. People will probably be mad about this, but I'll put it in A tier, under Legacy of Goku 1. Now Taiketsu is a pretty tough one. This OST is pretty fine, and I could definitely vibe to this while playing a fighting game. However, I don't really think I can put it super high on the list, so I think a B tier would be fine. Although it's pretty good, on a scale of 1 to 10 on how much I would listen to it again, I'd probably give it a 3. Supersonic Warriors was another fighting game, but a more hyper one compared to Taiketsu. That fact also reflects on the music of this game. It's a lot more upbeat and it fans the heat of the battle in every moment. It's not a bad OST, but honestly, GBA compression is what keeps me from giving it a super high score, so I'm putting it in B tier. The next game in the Legacy of Goku series was Blue's Fury, and that game's OST is just like the other games. Pretty good, and it uses Falconer's score for some songs in the soundtrack. Just put it between the two in A tier. I like Dragon Ball Advanced Adventures OST. The game is different to the games the list went over so far since it's a side-scroller, and the OST is pretty fitting for its genre. I'm tempted to put this in S tier honestly, but I don't know if I can put it that high. So instead, I'll put it very high in A tier. For the last GBA game, it's the last game in the Legacy of Goku series, GT Transformation. And as the other 3 games, it uses the Western soundtrack of Dragon Ball GT as a base. GT's Western soundtrack isn't as remembered as Z's, but that doesn't make it bad. It's alright. In other words, just put this next to the other games. They all can be interchangeable in my opinion. Now Supersonic Warrior 2's menu song alone could go to S tier. Starting off the DS era with this game game's soundtrack is just evil. And with that song being one of the first songs you will hear from that soundtrack, kind of tells you what we're getting into from here. As far as the arc-sis-ness of the soundtrack, it's certainly there, but I think this is probably my favorite soundtrack from their Dragon Ball games. It just sounds so much like an arcade game's soundtrack, which I'm a huge fan of. Too bad there's no higher quality version of this soundtrack anywhere. I'm just gonna do something that might get me in trouble, but since it's my tier list, I don't care. Put it in A tier. Harukanaru Densetu is a card game, but it does have some pretty good music. I don't know why there are a lot of bangers in this game, but I know if I were to play this game, I would have probably been really fond of this game's soundtrack. But I don't know if I could put it in S tier as well, so I'll put it as a solid A tier. Dragon Ball Origins is an action-adventure game, and to be honest, although I don't think the soundtrack is bad, I also am not a huge fan of it. It is fitting for a Dragon Ball rather than Z, which is good for the game since it is pre-Z, but there are just so many better songs out there from this franchise. I'll give it a B tier. I grew up with Attack of the Saiyans, and this game is really cool, but I don't know if I could say the same for its OST. It isn't bad, but there isn't anything memorable here. I mean, the battle theme can be memorable, but that's only because you would hear it a bunch of times. I think I'd put this OST in B tier as well. Just like Origins 1, Origins 2 has a pretty adventuresque soundtrack, but somehow, this soundtrack sounds a lot cooler than the first game, and this also is pretty fitting because this does go over the more darker parts of Dragon Ball where it started to actually become a lot more in depth. I'd put this in low A tier. For the last DS game, Dragon Ball Kai Ultimate Butoden was a game I honestly didn't know existed until I made my video about the handheld games. It had a lot going for it for a mere DS Dragon Ball game, but to be honest, I don't really think this game's OST is that amazing. It's fitting to the game since it's a fighting game, but I don't know when I would be jamming to this OST. But it isn't a bad OST, it's just not my cup of tea. I would, however, put it above the first Origins game in B tier. To start off the PSP era, I'll do both Shin Budokai games, and it's because of one simple reason. This OST is just the same as the Budokai game's soundtrack. Although this game does have some original songs, unfortunately, I can't say it's enough to salvage it from the reused tier. And it's a shame because the game's original songs do have pretty good ones in there. How unfortunate. And then Dragon Ball Evolution came out. This was made by the same people who made Shin Budokai, by the way. Believe it or not, I think this soundtrack is actually pretty good. No more compression from the DS and Game Boys anymore. At least, not as much compression. But a higher quality soundtrack for a handheld Dragon Ball game existing is just great. Unfortunately, this game was the first to do it. A game that feels like the least Dragon Ball one. This may be controversial, but I actually will put this above Budokai 1's soundtrack in A tier. And if you don't think that's justifiable, listen to the soundtrack yourself. These songs sound cool. And for the last PSP game, Tenkaichi Tag Team is a Budokai Tenkaichi game but 2v2s instead of 1v1s. The game's soundtrack is more closely related to the Raging Blast series in terms of its style. I mean, the game did come out closer to that series than the Tenkaichi one. It is solid, and I do think it's better than both Raging Blast games' soundtrack, but honestly, not by much. Some of these games' songs were used in the Budokai HD collection, so I guess I am a bit more fond of the soundtrack because of that. Anyways, put it in A tier. Now here comes the 3DS with 3 Dragon Ball Heroes games ahead of us. And to start this console off, we have Dragon Ball Heroes Ultimate Missions. Although I'm not very interested in this series, the OST is pretty alright. It fits the game very well, giving it a more arcade feel to it. And obviously that makes sense since the series is, or at least was, mainly an arcade game. Anyways, I'll give it an A tier. The main theme of almost every Heroes game is really good though. The next game was Ultimate Mission 2. This game does add more music and includes the same songs from the previous games. We've got a Budokai situation here. Ironic given the fact that this game was also made by Dimps, which by extension, Xenoverse 1 and 2 also share OSTs for the most part. This company's pretty interesting. Anyways, I'll put this next to the first game since the new songs are pretty similar and not bad at all. And I will give it extra points since I like this game's opening song. Extreme Butoden was another Arc System game, and the OST kind of shows that this time too. This soundtrack can be listened to in fighters, just so you know. It's actually a pretty nice OST, and to be completely honest, I think I like this a little bit more than Fighters' OST. I know some people would hate this decision, but I'm putting this OST just above Fighters in A tier. Dragon Ball Fusions is probably one of the more beloved Dragon Ball games that no one talks about. Every time someone has something to say about the game, they talk about it fondly. I can't be one of them because I never played the game, but this game's OST though? When I initially talked about this game on the Handheld Games Part 2 video, I didn't have a good listen to this game's music, but listening to it fully, I heavily underestimated the soundtrack. It's really good. Like, the biggest sin about this game is the fact that it's locked behind the 3DS of all things. If it were released on console, this game would have 100% been more appreciated. I'll put the soundtrack in A tier. I know, I praised it a lot only to put it in A tier. Whatever the case, it's still good. By the way, this game was made by the same people who made Genshin Squadra, a game I've been enjoying in its OST too. And for the final game for the 3DS, it's the final Dragon Ball Heroes game on this console, Ultimate Mission X. Similar to the last game, it shares music from both games and adds more. The new songs are actually pretty good though, the best I've heard from the series so far. I'll put it above both in A tier. And for the last console for today, the Switch. What is it doing here? I'm counting it as a handheld. Watch the Handheld Part 2 video to know why. Super Dragon Ball Heroes World Mission was the only exclusive, not counting PC, game on the Switch. You guys will never believe this, but this game also reuses songs from the previous games. You would think the new version of the game will only have original songs, but no, it does have originals and quite a lot actually. But that's because this game came out near the end of the Heroes timeline, so all the content from that series was pretty much packed into this game, I think. Anyways, just put it above the previous games, I don't really care. Kind of anticlimactic, but kind of what you expect for this game being the last in this list. And there you have it. This was an actually hard tier list to make because I had to add more to the already existing one I made. I'm surprised I didn't put any games in S tier, but I didn't really think any game had that legendary OST that the S tier games have. A lot of A tiers and more D tiers to the list. I didn't add the PS Vita to this list because that console only had Battle of Z. Do you guys agree with this list? Also, I added Sparking Zero to this list before this video when I initially reviewed the game and put it in high A tier. But to be honest, I think I'm moving it up to S tier because the game's OST is just really good. The more songs I listen to from this game, the more gems I find. Anyways, that's the list for now, until I talk about the next set of Dragon Ball games. Did you say this was gonna be short? No. Well, it sure took too long. Well, this was your idea. No, it wasn't. But you still agreed to do it though. Besides, if we did your idea, it still would have taken long. I guess you're right about that one. I guess the moral of the story is Dragon Ball videos take too long to make. Now see me next time where I talk about Sparking Zero again. Again? Are you serious? Also, what was this conclusion? You didn't even talk about the list.